In My Hero Ultra Rumble, several characters have alternate battle styles. Each battle style shifts a character into a completely different role, with new abilities, strengths, and playstyles that can make them feel like an entirely new character. One example of this is the Overhaul battle styles. The support version of Overhaul is focused toward dealing big damage from a safe distance, while the assault version is more centered around mobility. Even though they technically share the same character, they play very differently. So the question is simple, which Overhaul is better? My name's Yestermorn, and in this video we're breaking down support Overhaul versus assault Overhaul, comparing their abilities, playstyles, strengths, weaknesses, and how each one performs in today's competitive environment. If you enjoy in-depth character breakdowns like this, consider liking the video or subscribing. With that said, let's get into it. First, we'll compare each Overhaul's abilities, starting with their alpha. Support Overhaul's alpha, Underworld Crusher, throws sharp rocks that explode either on impact or once they reach their maximum range. It's a pretty simple ability, but it works a little differently from most other alphas. Each shot contains multiple projectiles, meaning all of its damage isn't concentrated into a single hit. It deals decent damage, but also has pretty high knockdown. The biggest downside is its slow travel speed. Compared to most alphas, it can be tricky to hit enemies from a distance, especially if they're flying or moving quickly. It's good for dealing some quick damage and immediately knocking someone down to give yourself room to escape, but outside of that, there aren't many situations where I'd prefer it over other alphas. Assault Overhaul's alpha, Showering Shot, fires a barrage of stones that home in on enemies. You can move while attacking too, allowing Overhaul to slide around and become a much harder target to hit. Because of this, it works really well from a distance, while chasing enemies, or when repositioning during a fight. The trade-off is that it doesn't deal very much damage. When aiming, the alpha changes into a more traditional ranged attack that fires larger stones. These deal significantly more damage and are better when you're actually trying to pressure an enemy head-on. So the two versions serve very different purposes. The normal alpha is great for mobility and consistent pressure, while the aimed version is your better option for raw damage. Both of these alphas are pretty different from your standard alpha, and each has its own use cases. Underworld Crusher deals decent damage, has high knockdown, and works well with Overhaul's other abilities like his Gamma. On its own though, it doesn't provide a ton of value. Showering Shot is a much more versatile tool thanks to its two different firing modes, giving Assault Overhaul options for both mobility and consistent damage. Next, let's look at their beta abilities, starting with Support Overhaul. His beta, Piercing Dark Spear, causes massive rock spikes to shoot out from the ground or walls. The range on this ability is really good, and Overhaul's positioning doesn't matter much either. Even if he's standing on top of a building, he can still create spikes on the ground below. This is Support Overhaul's best option for raw damage. The slight delay can make it tricky to land at first, but you can fire off multiple attacks very quickly and deal a ton of damage if they connect. Once you get the timing down, it feels great to use. The main downside is that the spikes are stuck to surfaces, so they're basically useless against aerial opponents. However, that can also work in their favor. Since Piercing Dark Spear isn't a traditional projectile, it can bypass defensive abilities like Momo's Shield or Dobby's Ring of Fire and hit enemies that other ranged attacks normally couldn't. Assault Overhaul's beta is Blighted Precipice, the ability the battle style itself is named after. Overhaul rides a rising stone pillar that can change direction based on your input. You can also jump while using it to launch yourself off, and even use Showering Shot while ascending. This is Assault Overhaul's main mobility option, but it does a lot more than just move him around. The pillar can deal damage on its own, combos well with his other abilities, and automatically gives Overhaul both cover and a height advantage. That last part really can't be understated, since you're repositioning while also creating protection and putting yourself in a better spot to attack. These betas are obviously very different. Piercing Dark Spear is primarily a damage tool with great range and the unique ability to bypass certain defenses, but its reliance on surfaces can make it inconsistent. Blighted Precipice, on the other hand, provides a little bit of everything. It gives Assault Overhaul mobility, damage, cover, and a height advantage all at once. While Piercing Dark Spear is definitely the better option for raw damage, Blighted Precipice is the more versatile ability overall. Lastly, let's take a look at their gammas. Support Overhaul's Gamma is Coffin of Absolute Shackles. With it, he unleashes a wave of rock in front of him that travels forward and immobilizes any opponents it hits. This is easily the best ability Support Overhaul has, no question. Not only does it deal good damage for a single hit move, but the immobilization gives him a ton of options afterward. He can follow up with any of his other abilities for even more damage, or use that opening to escape, heal, or reposition if the fight isn't going his way. This really is the ability support Overhaul needed to complete his kit. His Alpha and Beta are entirely focused on dealing damage, while his Gamma gives him the utility and crowd control he needs to survive. It ties the rest of his kit together and gives him an answer for situations where simply dealing more damage isn't enough. Assault Overhaul's Gamma is Coffin Shot. Overhaul dashes forward and strikes an opponent, restraining them in stun before detonating it. This is a pretty weird ability, and there's actually a lot going on with it. It's basically a built-in combo with multiple stages that eventually add up to pretty good damage. Because of that, it's especially strong in 1v1 situations. The tracking is also insane. Sometimes you'll lock onto enemies you weren't even trying to hit. Unfortunately, the actual hit registration is a completely different story. Coffin Shot can be extremely finicky, and there are plenty of times where the attack connects but just doesn't work properly. You can also combo Coffin Shot with his other abilities for even more damage. In a pinch, it can even function as another movement option, but I generally wouldn't recommend wasting it that way. You only get one charge even at level 9, so using it purely for movement can leave you without one of your strongest tools when you actually need it. These Gammas are actually fairly similar. Both are great at locking down opponents and dealing solid damage. Coffin of Absolute Shackles is much more consistent and versatile since it can be used from a distance, and the immobilization gives you plenty of time to decide what to do next. Coffin Shot is more aggressive with great tracking and strong 1v1 potential, but its inconsistent hit registration and single charge make it a lot less reliable. Overall, these two versions of Overhaul have pretty different strengths despite sharing some similarities. Support Overhaul is the more grounded and defensive of the two, relying on strong damage, range, and crowd control to keep enemies where he wants them. His Gamma ties everything together, giving him an easy way to set up his other attacks or create an opening to escape. He also has 350 HP, giving him a noticeable survivability advantage and somewhat making up for his lack of mobility. Assault Overhaul, on the other hand, is much more mobile and versatile. Blighted Precipice gives him an easy out, while his Alpha lets him stay mobile as he attacks, and his Gamma gives him a strong option for close range fights. The trade-off is that he only has 300 HP, and some of his abilities, especially Coffin Shot, can be less consistent. Support Overhaul is more straightforward and reliable, while Assault Overhaul has more tools to work with and can adapt to a wider variety of situations. So, which Overhaul is better in the current meta? Well, it's very close, and I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. For me though, Support Overhaul has a slight edge right now. Before the season, I probably would have said the opposite, but the small buffs Support Overhaul received have made him a much more consistent choice. Both versions already have great survivability, so Assault Overhaul's extra mobility isn't always as valuable as you might expect. Most of the time, I'd rather have Support Overhaul's higher damage and extra 50 HP, especially with how strong his Gamma is at controlling fights. He definitely still struggles against aerial characters and doesn't have any ways to get around, but in the current meta, his strengths slightly outweigh those weaknesses. That being said, this is probably one of the closest battle style comparisons in the game. You really can't go wrong with either one. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Which Overhaul battle style do you prefer, Support or Assault? Let me know in the comments, and if you'd like to see more battle style comparisons, be sure to tell me. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking it or subscribing for more Ultra Rumble content. Thanks for watching, this has been Yestermorn, and I'll see you in the next one.